Serious, people that have been kidnapped, what's your story? I accidentally aided in my own kidnapping. I was texting my boyfriend at the time in college to pick me up out front. I always walked and waited outside of the campus roundabout and security gate because there is always huge traffic there. I waited on the sidewalk or in the parking lot of a nearby business. A white truck approached and stopped by me. I was looking at my phone and not paying attention and got in the passenger seat. The truck drove off. I looked up and noticed the interior was different and totally screamed when I looked over at the driver. It was a random guy and not my boyfriend. I told him to pull over and that I made a mistake. He said that he wanted to get to know me and grabbed my hand. He started asking really personal questions and trying to take my phone and purse. I told him to let go and banged on the window screaming. He stopped at a red light and I threw the door open and got out and weaved through traffic to get to the sidewalk. I called my boyfriend and he picked me up in his white truck. I didn't get any info on the truck because I wanted to get the hell out of there. But I sure learned my lesson. I was on my way home from school. I think I was 11 years old and I wore this really cute skirt and top. This guy in a car kept following me. I had no idea what to do and nobody was around. He ended up pulling me into his car and forced me to give him a BJ. He just happened to have a pic of his wife and kids right at my eye level and I stared at my pic trying not to cry or scream. Then he threw me out of his car. I stopped wearing skirts after that. My mom kidnapped my brother and I from our abusive father when we were like 9 to 10. She took us to her mother's house in Idaho. We were previously in Illinois. We enrolled in school and went to school for a full year before my dad found us. He picked us all up and drove us back, telling us how we were going to be a family again, and he realized where it went wrong. When we got back, he immediately filed for divorce and abused us again. Just before the hearing, he got my mom loaded on vodka and he pants fell down in court. Needless to say, he won and got the paycheck he was looking for. My mom was shipped off to Oklahoma to live with her father and get back on her feet. My sister was almost kidnapped in the 80s. She was shopping at the mall with my aunt when she wandered off. My aunt went looking for her and went to security, who made an announcement over the intercom that a little girl was missing. At that moment, a customer noticed a man walking out to the parking lot holding a little girl over his shoulder and yelled at him to stop. He dropped my sister and jumped into a car parked right outside the doors. He was never found. A lot of people don't usually think about it, but oftentimes children are kidnapped by their own parents. I was about 9 or 10 years old, middle of 5th grade. My parents divorced a while back and I was living with my mom even though my dad had full custody. He was desperately poor from dealing with all the court stuff and my mom stealing large sums of money from him, and he couldn't afford to have my sister and I living with him. My mom had talked to us before about what it'd be like to have our own house instead of sharing with my grandma. The only reason my dad probably trusted her was because my grandma was there, and as a kid I didn't think much of it. One day she packed all of our stuff into her car and grabbed my younger sister and I to put us in. Apparently prior to that my grandma and aunt were trying to keep her from coming in, knowing full well what she was trying to do, but she was able to break in anyway. She ended up doing quite a bit of damage to my aunt and my grandma's house. I honest to go debates jumping out of a moving car, at 10 years old, but I couldn't leave my younger sister, about 5, so I stayed. In the car she asked me to throw her phone out the window so she wouldn't be tracked. Of course, being barely 10 years old I couldn't do it, so she grabbed it from me and did it herself. We stayed at a motel the first night and someone in the building had called the ambulance for their roommate or whatever and she lost it thinking she was caught, but it was for another person in the building. The next day or night maybe, I believe only one night passed, but hell if I know. My dad was there talking to her and he had lots of police hiding out around the corner in case anything happened. He was able to get my sister and I out of the car and drive away, and the police came and took care of her after that. I was very close to being put on Amber Alert. I still don't know why my mom cared about taking my sister and I when she's never cared for anything but money. After the incident she was given permission to call us, but she never did and I haven't heard from her since. Except that she changed her name, asked my dad for more money on my 13th birthday, and recently tried to add me on Facebook when I briefly made one to join my university textbook selling page. I immediately blocked her and deleted the account. I've always avoided making a Facebook for that specific reason. I'm much older now and in college. I actually just realized I got really depressed out of nowhere this past winter, and that was actually the 10-year anniversary, I guess you could say. I wonder if that had anything to do with it. I hadn't even realized until now. Sorry for the long story, and no worries, the event doesn't bother me anymore and I've honestly blocked a lot of it out. I felt okay sharing also because it isn't often talked about how common it is for parents to kidnap their children, but it is quite common in unhealthy/dysfunctional family situations. When I was 3 or 4 years old, in 1986, a man broke into my bedroom window and stole me out of bed. Later, the man and his wife told the police that they couldn't have children of their own and they planned to raise me as theirs. It's just my luck that I got snatched by the world's stupidest kidnapper. The town I grew up in is really small, 5,000 people live there, so when this man took me back to his house on the other side of this really small town and told his neighbors that I was his and his wife's newly adopted daughter, the neighbors, were like, "No she isn't, we recognize that kid, that's my mom and dad's kid," and called the police immediately. I was rescued within a day. The guy kidnapped me at night, and the cops raided his house later that day after his neighbors tipped them off. If the guy and his wife had had the foresight to take me to, I don't know, the next town over, I'd have a whole different family right now. Or maybe they would have murdered me. Who knows? When I was really little, my family and some friends went to Hong Kong. We visited a fishing place where there were a lot of boats, almost like a harbor, very crowded. I remember seeing a van with policemen standing outside chatting happily. My mom asked my dad to take care of me while she looked at some stuff. Being the little kid I was, I wandered elsewhere and suddenly a man held my hand really tightly. At that point I remember it never occurred to me that I was about to get kidnapped for some reason. I thought the dude mistook me as his daughter. My thoughts of this repeated in my head and I felt a little scared after a while. It was weird cause the guy didn't drag or pull me, he just stood there. Thankfully my mom saw this and basically started him down and he ran away. I have no idea why he ran away so easily, but I like to think it was God who helped. A few years back when me and my sister were talking about it, she said she remembered a dude, same description of what I remembered him looking like, asking questions to her and my friend like where do you come from, how old are you, and creepily touching their arm. Thank God I'm safe, and let's just hope those policemen caught him and everyone else stays safe. I wasn't the victim but the accidental rescuer when he escaped his kidnappers and ended up in my kitchen waiting for the police. He said that they were beating him in the back of his own speeding SUV, and asking for phone numbers of anyone who would pay a ransom to get him back. They put a gun to his knee to shoot him so he couldn't get away and he started praying. One of the kidnappers heard the prayers and stopped the attack, seeing that he was a brother in God. So, not only was he not shot but the beating faded substantially for the rest of his captivity. He still got blood all over my kitchen, though. Pray when the bad guys take you, I guess. Happened when I was far too young to remember, but from what I was told. When I was 2 years old my parents separated and my mom felt that it was in our best interest to board a bus out of province in the middle of the night. The only reason her foolproof plan was foiled, the motel she was living in had conveniently caught fire, drug addicts, and when my dad heard came looking for me. He won full custody after that, and any time I were to leave our province had to go through a whole court process. When I was 10 and my sister was 12 we, Americans, were living in Isfahan, Iran, where my dad, a diplomat, was stationed. Our mom went on vacation to France that summer while the two of us ran wild with no supervision. Near the end of the summer our dad told us we were leaving, but didn't say where. A 10-hour drive to Tehran on, back then, dirt roads, then a flight. During the flight we walked back to where our dad was seated and asked when we would be back in the States, because we assumed that's where we were going, but he said that wasn't where we were headed but wouldn't say where. We landed in Madrid and were met in the airport by a British woman about our dad's age. He introduced us to her. "This is Pat, your new mother. You'll never see your other mother again." We stayed in Madrid a few days, and Pat gave us things we had never been allowed to have, like candy, gum, comic books. Then we all flew to Mallorca, the island. There Pat had a vacation home, her 3 kids were there. Pat's kids and the 2 of us would walk to the beach every day, as I recall alone, but there might have been a nanny with us. One day our dad told us we needed to break the news to Pat's 3 kids that they would be getting him as their new dad. What a coward he was. After this we all flew to London, and Pat's kids went to boarding school, and, after shopping at Harrods for uniform fittings, so did my sister and me. We were stashed at Hollington Park School for Girls in St. Leonards-on-Sea, a school straight out of Dickens' novel that has since closed. We were in different classes and were forbidden to speak to each other. Once we got around the rule by getting the other girls to stand around us so we could see each other and ask, "What's going on with mom and dad?" But we had no clue. So meanwhile our mom had finished her vacation and returned to Isfahan to an empty house. She had no idea where we were, and neither did the embassy where our dad worked. Spoiler, he was relieved of a lot of his duties after this. She went through the house, and found a bunch of brochures for boarding schools in France, Switzerland, and England, though, and figured we might be at one of them. So she sat down and wrote a letter to each of the churches of her religion in those 3 countries and asked members to ask at local boarding schools to see if we were there. Amazingly, that's how we were found, and she came to get us right before Christmas. We all got on a plane, this time for sure headed back to the States, and making fun of our mom's American accent that sounded so odd to us. She asked us if we wanted to go back to that school or stay in the States, and we didn't have to think twice. Our dad in the meantime had spent the college funds our bank president, Grandpa had set up for us and our 2 much older siblings on Pat, who dumped him. Our parents were soon divorced. Years and years later I tried to get him to talk about that fiasco, but all he would say is, "That was a very difficult time." He had his reasons for what he did, I guess. Probably our mom's crazy religion played a part. My sister and I survived, but, speaking strictly for me, I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone but our budding author. Lots of material here. I was on the bus in UK when I was like 12 with a couple of friends, and when I pressed the bell to get off I pressed it like 100 times to be a dick with the noise. The bus driver got mad and said, "You aren't getting off here now." Then he took us to the next stop, which was only like 100 meters further, so no big deal. Told my mom and she phoned the bus company and police to complain, and the driver was fired because it was kidnapping keeping me on the bus when I wanted to get off. So he got fired because he kept me on the bus for like 30 seconds extra. Feel bad about it, to be honest. I was almost kidnapped. It was in 7th grade. I live by a park with woods, so it's darker than you think it is. Me and my best friends were on the trail burning some dead grass before we decided we should get going. It was about 7:38 in the winter in Texas, meaning it gets dark at 6/7. I walked back into my neighborhood, which has an elementary school in the middle and my house on the other side of the school. I'm walking by the basketball court when a car drives by, then stops once they pass me. So I stop. The car then goes into reverse and pulls down the street next to me. So I run through the basketball court and hide on the side. I knew the YMCA was inside, but my house was also right there. I hid behind a portable and saw the car go down the middle of the bus pickup. I waited, then ran through the field in front of my house until I see the car go down my street. I throw my bag and lay flat on the ground till it was at the end of my street. I grabbed my bag, jumped the fence and ran inside. Never told my parents in Stillhaven. It happened when I was 13-14. I'm now 19 and refuse to walk home alone past dark, even though I always carry a pocket knife and taser. In elementary school, a new girl started closer to the middle of the school year. I talked to her a couple of times because we both went to the Boys and Girls Club after school. About her 6th or 7th day we were walking together to B&GC, and all of a sudden she just starts hitting me and pulling my hair, all while saying, "No, stop, don't be scared, we are just going to the secret playground on the mountain up there." I look up and it was not a mountain, it was just a hill, and there was no playground. I started trying to fight her myself, but her surprise attack on me really gave her an advantage, and she was bigger than me. She started dragging me over the concrete road to her parents' car, but before we got there another student noticed and came over and got her off of me. Turned out her uncle was trying to get this girl to lure me with her so that he could do whatever his sick mind was thinking. He's in jail now for having and producing child porn, and the girl ended up getting taken away from her parents. I don't know everything, but I do know she was a victim of his crimes and testified in court against him. We didn't have internet back then, so I don't really know much else on how things went for her. Non-traditional kidnapping, but I have wanted to vent this for a while and feel bad continuously whining my problems to my friends. When I was about 4 or 5, my parents split up. My dad's family lived about 6 hours away from us down south. My mother didn't know what area, just the city, and it's a big city. My dad was supposed to take us there to meet our abuelo and abuela, but he just didn't take us back at the end of the weekend. We ended up staying for about a week. On the way there he said some crap like, "This is your home now, this is your real family," and when we got there he bought us all kinds of presents so we'd want to stay, hoping us telling my mom we wanted to stay with him would finally break her down and let his crazy ass get custody. I'd why my mom didn't call the cops or anything. Maybe she did. My memory is very foggy from those years.